Hello, Deb.
Hey, Kathy.
We've known each other for a number of years, and before we talk about spiritual survival in this segment, I want to ask you how and why you made that transition from TV anchor to ministry.
Well, it wasn't an instant transition. It was a transition of probably 5 or 6 years. When I left television, it really wasn't my choice. I wasn't quite ready, but the choice was made for me. And after that, I went into public relations, and I did that for 5 years. And really, the ministry thing, I didn't make a decision to do it. I took a class at the seminary because it looked like fun.
Oh,
And I would put fun in little, quotation marks.
right.
It just looked interesting to me. I didn't know that my life was going to take a dramatic change or turn to the right that way.
So it sort of slowly morphed into this new career for you.
And I think that is something that people kind of need to be aware of, is that when you go through a big change, on the one hand, you want to have goals and have a plan and all of those things. But on the other hand, you really have to stay open to the opportunities or the possibilities that are there for you that you haven't been able to see or experience before. Because I never, ever would have dreamed, on the day that I left television, I never would have dreamed that I was going to become a minister. As a matter of fact, not long after I left television, someone at our church invited me to speak about change.
Oh,
And a gentleman came up to me afterwards and said, "You ought to be a preacher. Have you ever thought about being a preacher?"
oh my goodness.
And honestly, I laughed.
It hadn't occurred to
I
you.
laughed. I said, "Oh, no way. That's not for me." And that's exactly where I landed all those years later. So you
I think
just
that's
don't know what's
such
coming
an
at you.
important point about having the openness to be available to what arises, to what comes up, to what opportunities might be out there. Because we have this assumption, and we're sort of trained to think, have a plan,
Right.
work your plan,
Right.
set a goal, have a strategic plan, have a 10-year plan, a 5-year plan. And those are so limiting in some ways because they sort of give you one narrow option
Right.
down the road, and this sort of opens up. So you're just such a great example of someone who's been able to take advantage of, really had two very, very distinct and very successful careers, and very separate. Have you been able to help other people as they talk about that sort of career transition journey, particularly now in your pastoral role?
Well, I think, like a lot of things in life, just seeing someone who you know has survived it, whether it's cancer, whether it's alcohol or substance abuse, whatever it is, that you look at someone and say, "Wow, this person was where I am, and now they're not."
And they did it.
Yeah, they did it. It's a powerful, reassuring thing. And so, yeah, I do find myself saying to people, "I've been where you are." At the same time, everybody's experience is unique. And sometimes this is a little bit of a soapbox for me, but sometimes we as humans, it's a way that we're trying to connect, but we say, "Oh, that happened to me too."
Right.
And we don't honor that other person's unique experience. So one of the ways that we support people through a hard time is just really being present to what's happening for them. And it's their experience, not yours.
And
it's
really
their job
listening
loss.
versus talking
Right,
can go a long way in offering support.
right, right.
Even though we sometimes think, oh, I just need to tell them it'll be okay.
Right, right.
We feel such an urge to do that.
Right. And because if we care about them, we want it to be okay for them.
Right.
We don't want to feel anxious for their upset or their job loss or whatever they're going through. And I really think it's a tension that we have as friends, as colleagues, as coworkers, as fellow church members, whatever community we're in, that on the one hand, you do want to hold out hope for people. It's not always going to be like it is today.
Right.
At the same time, we don't want to diminish what people are in.
And it is a hard thing to sit with someone else's pain and suffering and really be sort of there completely.
Right. And there's grief. When you lose something, whether it's a relationship, whether it's your own physical health, whether it's a job, there is a grief period in there. And so do you need to think positively and be hopeful and all of those things? Absolutely, no question about it. But you also have to honor the sadness and the disappointment that you experience.
And really allow that
Yep.
to work through you. When my mother died first, and then in a year my father died right after her, and people would talk about the grieving process, and I always described it as something that I wasn't working through grief, I was allowing grief to work me. And it felt like that was what was happening. I just had to let it work me. And it did, and then I sort of emerged on the other side, being able to look back, and I don't cry all the time, and that
Right.
sort of thing. But
Right.
it is definitely a process that has to be honored. So